as well as some of their components and comparing them to NURBS components and looking at some of the differences. Let's go ahead and drop a couple of primitive shapes out here into our scene. I'm just going to click on a sphere, a cube, and a cone, and they're all stacked up here in the center. I'm going to hit W on the keyboard, and I'm just going to pull these over along the x-axis. Okay, let's first talk about just ways of selecting. So right now we're just clicking on each of these, and that allows us to move them individually. If I drag a marquee across them, I can select all three of these, and then I can move them together like this. Okay, I can also hold down the Shift key and then Shift select the other two. And if I click on it again, it will deselect. So holding down the Shift key will allow you to select or deselect. Okay. Alright, if I hold down Shift Control, if you're on a Mac, it's Shift Command. You can see that I get a plus sign here, so it's going to add. So let me just deselect. So by deselecting, I'm just clicking out here on the grid. So I'm going to just click on the sphere, and now I'm going to Shift Control click on the next two. So what's different about this is if I click on it again, it's only going to add. So I've got that plus sign on there. This only adds, which is different than just holding down the Shift key. As you can see, I don't have any plus or minus on there. It just allows me to select or deselect. Okay? And then if I hold down just the Control key without the Shift, so just Control or Command if you're on a Mac, okay, you can see that I get a negative sign here on my cursor. So now if I click on that, it will only deselect. Okay, so I can't go back and select anything here. I would have to let go of that. So I could drag a marquee, hold down the Control or the Command key, and then deselect. Okay. All right, so I'm going to drag a marquee across all of these. I'm going to hold down the X key. You can see it's highlighting this magnet up here with the little grid mark next to it. So if I grab the arrow in the up position here, so this is moving or translating along the y-axis, and I have that X key held down, you can see that it's popping into place, so it's snapping along the grid. Okay? If I grab one of these and I hold down the X key, I can snap it along the grid. Okay? Same thing here, snapping it forward on the z-axis. See that a little bit better here. Okay. And another thing we can do is hit the D key. You can see that it just changed our manipulator, and it's allowing us to actually move the pivot point to a different location. So this is really important. If I want to align this pivot to the bottom of this cube here, I can hold down the V key. So the V key, you can see, is highlighting up here. It's the shortcut for snapping to points. We haven't talked about components yet, but it's snapping to a vertex, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So you can see the icon just changed a little bit there. It's got a square around there, that light blue square. If I hold down the V key, you can see it's now got a circle on it, and I can grab the translate Y and snap it down to the bottom here. Okay, and once I let go of that and then I hit D again, it goes back to just the standard manipulator. Okay, but we can now see that our pivot point is down here at the bottom. This is very useful. So now if I hold down the X key and I snap it up on the grid, I'm going to go to 4 to wireframe. We can see that our pivot point is right here in the 0, 0, 0 space. This is great for modeling, especially for game modeling. You're going to be doing this quite often. Okay, I'm going to go back to 5 on the keyboard, that's shaded mode. Okay, so let's talk about the various components that make up a polygon. I'm going to just zoom in here on our cube. And we have a lot of hidden marking menus inside of Maya. So by right mouse clicking, you can see that I've brought up a marking menu that is showing the different components for a polygon. So by default, we're in object mode. We know we're in object mode when we click on something and it's got a green edge around it like this. But if I right mouse click and I go to face, you can see that it's now highlighting over the different faces here. Okay, these are polygon faces. So polygons are made up of faces as well as edges that go around the faces. And I'm right mouse clicking again and I'm selecting vertex. And a vertex is this little point right here where the edges come together. Okay, so I can pull a vertex around now. See that? Okay. And I can drag a marquee over a couple of them and angle them out. You can see I just lost my marquee right there. I'm just going to hit Z to bring it back. Okay. So you can see how I can start shaping. We're still in a really primitive low polygon phase right here, but you can see how you can begin to shape something. If I were to hit R on the keyboard, scale in the center here, you can see that I've, kind of transformed the shape of this. Okay, so those are the components that make up a polygon. Again, we've got our face, that's the largest component. This is the polygon face. And the smallest face that you can have, we've got them right here, is a triangle. So it's got 3 edges. These are coming up to a single point up here. If I right mouse click and go to vertex, we can see the single vertice up here where all of these are connecting. The edges are all coming together to that one vertex. Okay, and these are all triangles here, or tris for short. Okay, these are 4-sided polygons, also called quads. Okay, and then we've got edges that go around our faces and they come together and meet at the vertex. Okay, so those are the main 3 components here. We have some other things that we'll get into. UVs we'll talk about in a whole other lesson here. The UVs basically sit in the same area as the vertex. They have different information in them that allows you to unfold a 3D image to a 2D space so that you can apply textures. Okay, but for now we're just going to be working with faces, edges, and vertex. If it's more than one vertex, it's referred to as a vertice or vertices. Okay, I'm going to go back to object mode and you'll see it go back to that green edge as opposed to the light blue edge here. Okay. Alright, so those are the main components of a polygon. I'm going to delete these and I'm going to drop out a sphere. This is a polygon sphere. I'm going to come over to the surface tab and I'm going to click on a NURBS sphere. Okay, and it's sitting right in the same place there. So I'm going to drag the NURBS sphere over here, grab both of these, hold down the X key, and I'm going to just pop them up here on the grid like that. Okay, so let's take a look at the different components between a polygon and a NURBS. If we were to just turn them off like this and click over here and deselect, we wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between these 2 objects until we actually click on them and we can see that they have some different edge quality to them. Okay, we've got a lot more edges over here on our polygon. Over here we have very few edges that are making up something that looks just as soft and smooth as this polygon over here. If I were to select this polygon sphere and come down to the polysphere input and reduce the subdivisions down, we would start to see something that looked much more faceted or low polygon. Okay, I'm just going to hit Z to undo that. So let's right mouse click over the NURBS sphere, and we'll see a marking menu come up that has some different components to it. Okay, so we've got isoparms, and isoparms are essentially the rings that are going around here, much like our polygon sphere has got the edges. An isoparm is the edges going around our NURBS. Okay, you may have noticed there's a little bit thicker line right here. NURBS are not really connected, so if I were to drop a cube out here and look at it, it would look just like a polygon cube, except these are actually all separate. If I were to come over here and grab a surface patch like this and pull it off, you could see that it's not connected to the other ones. If I were to drop a cube out here and we looked at that and made a comparison, if I went to face here and I pulled this out, it's attached. Okay, so the polygon is all connected. I just deleted it right there by the face. Okay, I'm just going to go back to object mode and delete that. And you can see that each one of these is separate. Okay, so the same thing applies. You can see that I'm just dragging marquees and deleting those. Same thing here. We've got an edge right here. If I were to go to the inputs, click on this, there's something called a sweep in here. There's a start and an end sweep. We can see it goes from 0 to 360. If I click on this and I middle mouse over here and I drag this, I can see it open up. Okay, so if I were to type in 180 here, we would have just a half dome or half sphere. Okay, I'm going to take it back to 360, hit enter. Okay, and let's just look at some of the other components here. We've got something called control vertex, which is a little bit different than the vertex we have over here on our polygon. So I'll get both of those up at the same time. I just shift selected that and went to component mode. So the control vertex, we notice something very different, that they're actually floating above the surface. Okay, as opposed to over here on our object mode, here we go, they are sitting on the surface over here. So if I were to pull a vertex over here, you can see it's very jagged. Okay, if I come over here and I grab a control vertex, grab this one up here, and I pull it, we can see that we have very different reaction. We have something very soft and organic looking. Okay, so these are some of the big differences between working with NURBS and polygons. There's different times that you may want to work with a NURBS primitive and start with that. Something like an eyeball might be an example. You can also convert NURBS to polygons. You can't convert a polygon to a NURBS though. Okay, if you're going to be working in a game engine, you will want to start everything from a polygon. The game engines can actually recognize a NURBS conversion to a polygon, and it could potentially cause problems with the game engine. Okay, but I just wanted to cover some of the basic components here and the differences. So isoparms are the edges here, various edges. You can see that I'm also inserting. Okay, we've got holes. Okay, so we can select holes like this and shape. So that's kind of like grabbing a whole row of the control vertex points and pulling them, shaping them. Okay, and control vertex. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to object mode, select this and delete. Same thing over here. Okay, so that pretty much covers how to select and deselect our objects in the scene, moving them around, and shift selecting, using the control to deselect, shift control select to add, and Control to subtract. Okay, and then we looked at some of the components of our polygons and compared those to the NURBS. Okay, we also talked a little bit about how to use the D key, and that allows us to change the pivot. We've got all of these selected, so we're seeing the pivots moving over here as well. So if I were just to come over here and do this, snap it down here, hit D, and then I could hold the X key down and snap this up to the center grid like that. Okay, and back to 5 on the keyboard for shaded. And we'll come back in the next lesson and we'll start looking at some other more advanced ways of selecting using soft select